I'm Robin Gagnon.
And I'm Eric Gagnon, and we sell restaurants. We started the nation's largest restaurant brokerage firm, We Sell Restaurants, over a decade ago. You can find us online at WeSellRestaurants.com.
We are on your radio once a week with the leading authorities in this industry talking about subjects trending in the restaurant business. Tweet your own questions on the topic to our Twitter handle, Sell Restaurants, or post them on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/We Sell Restaurants. If we don't get to your question, we'll follow up on social media.
Our goal is to satisfy your appetite for acquisition, feed the need for restaurant reality, and serve up a recipe for business success. If you have any ideas for our show or comments, you can email me. My email is eric@WeSellRestaurants.com. Today's show, we're going to be focusing on how you make your menu current and changing times.
That's right, Eric. Our show focuses on menu experts and the role they are playing in the industry. Gluten-free, kids menus, low-calorie, peanut, or other allergy-free options. It seems that it is impossible for a restaurant to have just a basic, great-tasting single menu anymore with all the demands from society to fit their changing dietary needs. We'll explore how menus are being adapted to fit customers' demands and how restaurants accommodate these options and still serve high-quality, great-tasting food.
And to discuss that further today, we are joined by Dr. Joy Dubost with more than 15 years of experience. Dr. Dubost has worked in the areas of clinical nutrition, research, product development, education, and communication. She served as a director of nutrition at the National Restaurant Association, where she provides leadership and expertise on a wide spectrum of health and nutrition issues related to the food service industry. She also owns Dubost Food and Nutrition Solutions, LLC, which specializes in scientific advising and communication. Dr. Dubost is a frequent speaker to health professionals and the public and has authored a research article for scientific journals, as well as nutrition and food service articles for professional and consumer publications. Dr. Dubost is also a national media spokesperson for the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Dr. Dubost, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We are also joined by Chef Scott Randolph, who began his career at the age of 15 as a dishwasher before quickly becoming a prep cook for an old-school Italian restaurant. After graduating from culinary school, Scott spent time abroad, pursuing his culinary education and learning as much as possible about global cuisine and the broad spectrum of cultural practices that define them. After returning to the States, Scott opened an Asian restaurant in Destin, Florida. It was here that he realized he had a keen talent for creating menus and restaurant concepts in addition to cooking. Scott soon worked in R&D for LSG Sky Chefs and TGI Fridays. He remains active with various culinary organizations, such as Restaurant Chefs Association and American Culinary Federation, and he takes part in culinary demonstration and speaks on various food topics at lectures across the country. Chef Randolph, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me this morning.
Okay, well, we're going to kick off this great topic by just talking about the ever-changing culinary environment. We see so many different menu concepts coming to market. What are the current trends in health and wellness in the restaurant industry, and are most of those menu changes health-related? Dr. Dubost, maybe you can kick us off with your thoughts on that subject.
Sure. Actually, the National Restaurant Association just released this week the 2014 What's Hot survey, which basically identifies what the trends will be in 2014 for the coming year. And definitely you can say, and I hate to even use the word trend because I think it's something that is here to stay, that health and wellness is very key when it comes to restaurants and menus. For instance, within the top 20 trends, and mind you, there's been over 200 trends that have been identified. So just within the top 10, we know that healthful kids meals and children's nutrition is in the top 10, at actually number 4 and at number 7. You may be wondering what the top number 1 trend was, and that was actually locally sourced meats and seafood, and in fact, locally grown produce was number 2. So we can see that consumers want to know where their food is coming from. They want to feel good about what they're consuming. So they feel like they're supporting the environment, and it's more, in their mind, more nutritious if it's locally sourced. So those were the top trends. But then again, children's nutrition also rose to the top.
That's great. Sounds like the people have spoken. And Chef Randall, can you weigh in on the same topic from your perspective and see what you're seeing out there? Is there an explosion in concept and specialized menu?
My company, Food and Drink Resources, does a lot of consulting for the top brands around the country, and it's actually amazing the amount of kids food updating that the brands are doing. So they're not removing the chicken fingers and the mac and cheese, but they're adding additional side vegetables, corn on the cob, fresh foods. French fries aren't the first option at a lot of brands anymore, and that's just the kids' food, and it doesn't stop in the kitchen anymore. We've been tasked to do a lot of work around the bar and creating fresh experiences around the bar, from adding fresh fruit to a lot of the cocktails, or making the mixes back to the house versus from manufacturer level with a lot of ingredients. So the bar is forced to use fresh ingredients, and farm to table is a prime example in a lot of these restaurants.
I think that leads us perfectly into the next question on my list. And Dr. Dubost, let's talk about those nutritional aspects. Exactly when the restaurants were advertising new and healthy menu options, what factors should they look for designing the menu for their customers?
Sure. So, based on current scientific evidence and what we call the dietary guidelines, which is basically the Bible for nutrition for many of us experts, we look at the science to see, what is truly part of a healthful diet. What should you be consuming? So for restaurant operators, a lot of it is just going back to the basics of the food group. And so incorporating more fruits and vegetables. I mean, we know that based on the dietary guidelines and what we call My Plate, that you're to make half your plate fruits and vegetables. So fruits and vegetables can, be the major component of the plate now. Also incorporating whole grains. In fact, whole grains was one of the top 20 trends as well. So incorporation of whole grains into the diet or onto the menu, as well as a focus on lean protein. And by that I mean, lean cuts of meat, or you can even focus on, more vegetarian dishes that would incorporate beans and nuts. So really those focus of those food groups, and even low-fat dairy can work its way into the menu as well. I mean, those are really kind of the foundation of a healthful diet.
Chef Randolph, we have another question that also could be very of interest to our listeners. Is that you sit in the grocery store, eating healthy usually costs a little bit more. So what are the financial impact if you see on national brands keep the menus on par with the dietary recommendation, and what are the financial impact, and how do they handle it from that perspective?
Well, that's a really good question. If you remember, a few years ago, the trans fat was a big topic, and a lot of the national accounts or national restaurant chains took a big hit financially. But through their manufacturing partners, they've helped reduce the cost due to efficiencies of manufacturing. And you're starting to see this removal of corn syrup and removal of sodium. The manufacturers are starting to take the lead to help, create better processes so they can reduce the food costs for the national accounts. With that said, a lot of the top 10 brands, the larger brands, are reducing portions of starches and actually adding choice of sides and things of this nature, because they're starting to find out that if you do a side of broccoli or you do a side of beans, it may be cheaper to do a mashed potatoes, because you don't have to prepare a bulk portion. You can prepare a portion to order. So there's a lot less waste and back to the house. So just through time and effort and collaboration between manufacturers and the restaurant chains, there's been a reduction in production costs.
That's really great information, and I think that up-and-coming chefs, that's where they should probably focus when it comes to designing specialized menu options. And we've sort of talked a lot about healthy, but what about the trend towards gluten-free and dealing with allergies? Dr. Dubost, how do you assist, as you speak on a national platform level, those who come to you and say, how do I segregate out my kitchen and avoid cross-contamination, and not just look at the nutritional value, but also those things that could negatively impact the customer's health?
Yeah, sure. So we do know, again, that within the top 20 trends this coming year, gluten-free cuisine ranked as number 5. Now, I think it's important to understand, the history behind that. many folks have what's called celiac disease, where they really do truly need to remove gluten from the diet. Otherwise, it will cause health implications to them. However, there's a large and growing population that's following gluten-free, not for the reasons of having celiac disease, but they feel that it promotes weight loss, or they feel healthier, or in their mind they may have some type of gluten sensitivity. And I think that's really what has spurred the trend along, not necessarily, from a celiac disease standpoint. But in order to do such, I think it's very important to note that the FDA just released regulations around what the legal definition of gluten-free will be. And that's going to make it a more tighter, if you will, preparation standard for back of house, in the kitchen, and even delivery to the customer to ensure that you're meeting those current regulations. Now, those will not go into effect until late next spring. However, FDA is taking a strong stance that it's going to impact packaged goods as well as restaurants. So if you're going to claim gluten-free, and this impacts all restaurants, not just chains, but independent operators to the large chains, if you're going to claim gluten-free, you got to ensure that you're meeting that legal definition. And so I would encourage your listeners to go to Surf Safe Allergens, which is a training program that does touch on some of this with regards to gluten-free, but also ensure that you're meeting those regs moving forward, because it's going to be a critical sticking point, if you will, now if you're going to claim gluten-free.
Thank you for this great information. We were at the last National Restaurant Association show, and we were amazed by how the size of the gluten-free section and how it had exploded in the last couple of years. And Chef Randall, have we only seen the tip of the iceberg on this, or we're going to, this is pretty much it, or we're going to see more explosion into that gluten-free world?
I believe this is the tip of the iceberg. You have some heritage brands, and the one that comes to the top of mind is P.F. Chang's, who's done gluten-free menu almost since day one. But I know a lot of the brands that we work with are moving towards a gluten-free menu, and it's just not creating the menu that's important. It's creating the cautious system in the back of the house, such as breading in-house, where the flour can float in the air and get in other materials. So a lot of these brands are going to pre-breaded, taking out breading stations, and just trying to minimize anything that can cause gluten allergens within their restaurants.
And that leads into a discussion about even your staff. And we talk a lot about staff training on the show, but with all the customer questions about what's in a dish or not in a dish, there is a lot of burden on a restaurateur to actually train their staff to understand what's in a dish. So if you have a new menu, you tell someone, oh, the daily special doesn't have any peanuts, but it may be prepared in peanut oil, the customer could become seriously ill, or even worse, and damage a restaurant's reputation. And it's not just wait staff. I've been to dinner with friends that suffer from celiac disease, and they will get the chef table side and start grilling them about all their choices before they even order. So everyone from head chef to sous chef has to know what's in the food. Isn't that right?
Yes, I would totally agree with that. I think it's a two-way street of communication. Not only does the restaurant need to be aware of what their consumers walking in the door have any type of sensitivity or allergen, but to your point, everybody that's involved in the preparation of that dish needs to be mindful of what those allergens are of that consumer.
And Chef, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, a lot of consumers with allergens tend to be creature of habit as well. And you'll see brands who have the gluten-free or the peanut-free or fat-free or even dietary things such as Weight Watchers or Atkins Seconds. A lot of consumers have trust in the brand that actually advertises. And when a brand advertises, they do everything in their power to make sure that the consumer is getting the best possible product with no missteps along the way.
We actually have a young nephew who has a myriad number of allergies. He's dairy, he can't tolerate dairy, can't tolerate gluten. I mean, there's just all kinds of things. And I would say that his family, our family, and everyone tends to be very focused on that. So I think that customer who has a given allergy, they are keyed in on what works for them and what doesn't work. And I can definitely see that that trend would be true. They're going to go back where they know that they don't run any risks with the kitchen staff or any cross-contamination, where they know they've eaten safely in the past and they feel confident about that going forward.
And Chef Randolph, I've kind of follow-up question on this, and more of a nuts and bolts part of it, and what you guys do, the consulting with the chains and everything. You create a menu, and there's either allergy-frees or different things that are contained in there. So the question comes to mind, that means choices, substitutions becomes an issue, because you can substitute maybe the whole grain rice for something, maybe some fried kale that could be cooked in peanut oil. So how do you educate the staff to make sure that these type of scenarios doesn't happen in the day-to-day operations?
Well, a lot of the top brands have taken precautions around the menu, and we'll use peanut oil as a prime example. I do not know a top 10 or top 20 brand that uses peanut oil outside of an Asian concept, strictly due to allergens. And most of them have taken actual peanuts or nuts out of the menu, besides walnuts or almonds, off their menu as well. And the other thing is, a lot of these brands really train their front of house managers and their lead cooks or their top chefs through a lot of sources of media, such as YouTube videos, online streaming. Everything's done in English, Spanish, and in some markets other languages. So there is a lot of detailed training that goes behind every dish or every platform that a lot of the top brands roll out.
And on the subject of training, Dr. Dubost, where does a restaurant operator go for training? I know some of the large suppliers hold seminars, and obviously National Restaurant Association, trade shows, publications weigh in. Would you say, is this a do-it-yourself endeavor, or do you need a nutritional advisor on staff or on retainer if you're operating a restaurant?
I think it depends on the operation and your comfort level. But I will say again, the National Restaurant Association just rolled out a SurfSafe allergen program. It's the only nationally accredited program out there that will allow certification of both the manager as well as the staff. We worked with Food Allergen Research Education Group, or commonly known as FAIR, to develop this allergen training program. So I would encourage all food service operators to get involved and to learn about SurfSafe allergens to really safeguard your restaurant.
It's a small investment in time and money to get that certification and have that safety level, I would say, wouldn't you?
Yes, definitely, and I think it's worth the investment. I can tell you from a policy perspective, from a state and local level, it's starting to heat up with regards to displaying posters of the top 8 allergens in restaurants and ensuring that the staff is trained. So I think this is here to stay. So the better trained you are, the more apt you will be able to handle such situations.
Right.
Chef Randolph, I want to come back to the financial impact of this, maybe for smaller operators, small mom and pops, or somebody that's more of a mid-sized chain. And their suppliers may not be quite as ready, or they may not be able to buy as large quantities and get the production deals. What are you seeing as far as maybe increase in food costs to get a part of your menu healthy versus or allergen-free or gluten-free versus your typical run-of-the-mill stuff that you would have on your day-to-day menu?
Well, it's not just the allergy-free and gluten-free where you're seeing a slight increase in food costs. It's the whole farm to table movement, and a lot of the consumers are really going after that. And if they put the gluten-free or allergens underneath the farm to table, it can all fall within the same food cost. Traditionally, food cost is an average of 32 to 33%, and a lot of the brands are trying to get down to 30%. So there is room for added items, and it's just it's the nature of working in a restaurant. And you have such items as poultry, which has come down, which will offset some of the fruits and vegetables and grains.
And is this something that the consumer is willing to pay more? Both of you can answer the question, I guess. Is the consumer willing to pay a little bit more for these because that's what they're wanting? Are they paying more for it? Are they willing to pay a higher price for these items?
Again, I think it kind of depends on the consumer as well as how frequently they dine out. Based on the research we've conducted, we know that 7 in 10 adults say they are trying to eat healthier, And a lot of times, if that's the case, they are willing to pay a little bit more. Um, and, I think it's also worth noting that almost 90% of adults say there are more healthful options at restaurants. So, again, that supply and demand is there, that consumers are wanting it and restaurants are supplying it. So, I think as far as an innovative standpoint, and Chef could speak more after this than I could, creating those healthful dishes at a low cost to the consumer is, of course, going to be a win-win situation.
You agree, Chef? You want to weigh in there?
I do agree, and I believe consumers are trying to eat healthier, and you can see it. If you remember, TGI Fridays a few years ago did the right portion, right price. It was a huge promotion because the portions were smaller. A lot of national brands were, removing the amount of pasta and removing the amount of rice and all these other items to help mitigate costs so they can increase the quality of food. I think this just all falls in line. And from a development standpoint, a lot of these brands are actually hiring corporate chefs who have nutrition backgrounds, who have food science backgrounds as well, so they can help develop healthier and more on-trend products moving forward.
And for the small mom and pop that operates, you don't have to have a nutritionist on staff necessarily, but you could go that route of bringing in an expert chef to modify, go through your menu, and give you insight maybe on a quarterly basis as a cost-saving way to attack this issue, correct?
Correct. There are a lot of services out there. We do quite a bit of that work in the Denver market at a very low cost. Just because we have a test kitchen, and we dine around a lot of places, and we meet a lot of chefs. So a lot of it's done through networking. I believe, as far as the chef community goes, we always like to help out each other because we like to see the mom and pop restaurants succeed because that's where your variety and that's where your trends and a lot of the new flavors come from.
Absolutely. And Dr. Dubost, do you see a lot of that happening where folks are calling in experts to, weigh in on their menu for a period of time without having someone full-time on their staff?
Oh, most definitely. Dietitians that work out with the restaurant operators have been a growing trend within the nutrition arena. So, I get frequent calls, and of course, it is a growing trend to work with a dietitian because they can really go through, particularly when it comes to allergens and gluten and making products healthier, really go through and do the analysis.
Oh, I think we're going to need a break right there just to hold that thought, though, because we want to come back. We're talking about modifying your menu with some experts in the country today. This is Eric and Robin Gagnon. We're the Restaurant Brokers. We'd like to thank today's Restaurant News, one of our sponsors. Stay tuned. We'll return after the break.